Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 175 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. Now, I've got to apologise first of all, because sorry if you were expecting an episode last week. And actually, today's episode was supposed to be coming out last Monday, but my guest and me have both really struggled to pin this one down. We've both been pretty busy the last couple of weeks, but we finally got here to get this down. And if you want the episode that was going to come out today, which is with Emily Addicott Suavo, I will be releasing that later this week. So you'll get 2 episodes this week. Don't say you don't get value for money with the Meet the Farmers. Anyway, today we are heading to the Westmorland Dales in Cumbria to meet mixed livestock farmer Jim Beary. Born a Lancastrian, Jim has moved his way through the northern counties and previously farmed in Yorkshire before coming to his current farm in Cumbria. His enterprises include a beef suckler herd, breeding ewes, B&B pigs, and recently a small poultry unit, which follows the sheep and cattle across the farm. Jim has been a focus farmer writer for Farmers Guardian in the past. He's also a former member of the Next Generation board of the NFU's Uplands Forum. Jim, welcome to Meet the Farmers. How is your week going? You're a very busy man.
No, not bad, thank you. Pretty wet, but nice and mild, and yeah, everything's looking green, so it's good.
It is super mild, isn't it? It's like crazy mild. I mean, we're recording this now on the 12th of November.
It's not 15 degrees here, and I keep getting up in the morning and putting a thermal on, and then coming in for a cup of coffee covered in sweat. So
yeah,
I'm going to blame the mild weather, but
I think so. How close to T-Bay services are you on the M6? That's probably the main place I know in your part of the world.
It's only about 15 minutes away, 5 miles.
Okay.
Not far at all, really.
And sort of tell us about your part of Cumbria, both landscape and community wise.
Well, it's the Westmorland Dales, which is basically a fairly new part of the Yorkshire Dales, and it was the aim of creating it as part of the park was to bridge the gap between the Yorkshire Dales and the Lake District.
Okay.
So the kind of boundary of the Dales and the Lakes is really the motorway at T-Bay. So this sort of area of the park now bridges that gap.
Yeah. Can you just tell us a little bit about, because I generally don't think we've actually talked about this on the podcast before, how it works sort of being within a national park in terms of how you're actually impacted both day to day and if you wanted to do anything new, say?
It varies between different parks across the country, but essentially there are restrictions, but also there's access to a lot of grant money. There's different agendas in different parks. So the Yorkshire Dales is quite focused on farming. They see that as integral to the landscape. There's a big emphasis on tourism, water quality, the environment.
Yep.
To be honest, much more positives than negatives in my experience.
Going back to your early life, let's do that. So you were born a Lancastrian, and your dad was a farm manager. Tell me a bit about your life growing up, and I suppose your early influences of farming in that as well.
Yeah, dad was a pig farmer and also a farm manager, pigs and intensive beef cattle. My uncle was a tenant arable farmer near Liverpool.
Yeah. So
I grew up on a farm. There was never really going to be an opportunity to pass anything down to me because it was either last generation on a tenancy or managed by my father and not owned by him.
Yep.
So, from a very young age, I sort of used to go out with dad and come back stinking of pigs and enjoying being on a farm. Really, there's always been a part of me that felt like that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I just didn't always know how I was going to do it or if it was going to happen.
I mean, tell me a bit more about your uncle, because so he was also a farmer, and I'm guessing that he was part of that inspiration as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my dad was an intensive livestock farmer, so there was thousands of pigs and literally about 1,000 beef cattle, most of which stayed inside, which is kind of the polar opposite of what I do now. But anyway,
yeah, exactly. Talk about going full set. Yeah,
yeah,
going the complete opposite.
well, yeah. And then my uncle was a tenant arable farmer on the Leverhulme estate, which is sort of in the northwest.
Okay. Yeah.
So very sort of productive farm, very good soils. But he I used to go and help. Well, say help him. I probably thought I was helping, but I was probably loading like two little bales onto a trailer. But I used to love, I used to love being there, and I was always really interested in what was going on both my dad's farms that he was looking after and my uncle's as well. So and him, my dad and my uncle were probably two people that I always really looked up to.
Yeah. You ended up going to Harper. Now, when you were on Millie Fife's podcast, you completely, or maybe she bypassed all this sort of time with you, maybe on purpose. But I want to hear some stories from that time.
At Harper,
Yeah.
In hindsight, I probably should have gone to my local college instead of doing A levels.
Okay.
Which was Myerscough College, but I followed my friends into sixth form and did a few A levels quite badly, but scraped through. And I wanted to do agriculture. My sort of plan B was perhaps to join the army or something like that.
Okay.
But I always, even if I'd done that, I would have wanted to come back into farming at some point. So, ended up getting a place at Harper. I actually worked for a year after my A levels on a neighbouring farm, so I felt like I'd had enough of studying, even though I didn't really put that much effort in. But I wanted to just get out and do some work for a bit and maybe learn a bit and earn a bit of money. So I did that. Worked on a neighbouring farm, which was pigs and a few beef and sheep cattle. Then went did a harvest over in Lincolnshire, which was quite a good experience. And then started at Harper. Started on a degree course. Quickly found out that I was starting to feel like I did again when I was doing my A levels, which I'm not particularly. I can scrape by, but I don't enjoy academics that much. So I changed to a HND.
Okay.
Which was one of the best things I did, really, because it was a bit more practically based. I enjoyed it a lot more. We were out in the field looking at things more than we were in the labs on the degree course, which wasn't really my interest. So from actually finding it quite difficult at Harvard to start with, I did find it difficult because there was a lot of people there from big farms with a very different background to me, really. So I struggled a bit at the start, but then I changed course, started to enjoy it, started to settle in a little bit more, and thought, right, I'm gonna stick with this and see it through. And I can't say I put as much effort in as I should have done. Still wasn't a great student, but I knew enough and found it interesting enough to keep passing and keep going on. I did have put a lot of effort into enjoying myself.
Good.
Probably a little bit too much, maybe. I mean, one story that sort of sticks out is I did poultry production, and the sort of module was a mock court case. So you were assigned a different role in this sort of court case.
Okay.
I think my role was production manager.
Right.
And then the exam at the end was actually the court case. So you were kind of spending your time getting your evidence together, and then you're marked on how you presented that in the court case. So we watched a video of the case from the year before.
Yeah.
And then we were encouraged to kind of dress up as solicitors and barristers and all sort of thing. And then it was filmed. The exam was like a kind of.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's filmed, and then we were graded based on that. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I didn't really know how the production manager would dress, so I managed to acquire a chicken outfit.
Brilliant.
And plucked up the courage, excuse the pun, and put the old chicken suit on, rocked up to this exam dressed as a chicken. And some people, most of them found it funny. The lecturer found it extremely funny. And
that's good. That's the main thing.
Some of the girls who had put a lot of effort into it, but were less amused. Anyway, got through the exam. On graduation day, the lecturer came and gave me a little box of those little bottles of French beer, and said, he said I'd got an A, which I wasn't expecting.
Congrats.
And then he said in 25 years of working there, it was the funniest thing that ever happened to him. So I just would have loved to have seen the following year watching the video. But...
Yeah, that's great. That's true. Actually, you should have gone back just for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, that's sort of what you were saying earlier about a slightly different background, I suppose, going into that and feeling slightly different. But obviously, you still had a farming background, but what would your advice be to someone coming from a similar place to you, or perhaps someone who doesn't have any ag background at all, no links, but still goes to either ag college or something similar? What would your advice be to them?
My advice would be that they are actually probably the sort of people that can potentially offer more to the industry, because you don't have preconceived ideas. You've got a fresh way of looking at things. You've got a different kind of enthusiasm. So don't just if, try and get as much experience as you can, and just go for it. You don't have to fit a mold. You got to do what you want to do, and if you're passionate enough, don't let anything stand in your way, and just get on with it and take what you can out of it yourself. Don't worry about things that are said and outside influences. Just focus on what you can take from it yourself to help you on your journey, really.
So after Harper, what did you end up doing?
Well, I did the HND, which involved a placement year down in Oxfordshire on quite a big pig and arable farm, which was bloody hard work. I remember my 21st birthday, which is my birthday's in February. I was stood in a field that was my knees in mud in Oxfordshire, feeding thousands of pigs, and it was freezing and absolutely.
One of those moments in your life when you think,
I remember, I'll never forget it. I looked up at the sky into this. It was raining into my eyes, and just thought, well, what have I done wrong in life to be here right now on my 21st birthday? Anyway, we got through it, and it was a bloody tough year, and they were hard people to work for. But on the last day, they brought me into the office, and basically said, they said, we know we're hard people to work for. We don't perhaps compliment people as much as we should, but they said that I've been one of the best students that they'd had.
Wow.
So
but that meant a lot. Yeah,
it did. And he sort of wrote his details down, gave it to me, and said, look, if we can ever do anything to help you in the future, just get in touch. So it was pretty mad, really, because it had been such a difficult job physically. It was pretty knackering. And at times I hated it, but that sort of 15-minute conversation in the office at the end of it made it all suddenly become worthwhile.
Yeah. So the farm in Yorkshire, though, and I don't know how much I'm skipping ahead here, but how did that come about? And sort of tell me about the time leading up to that.
Well, to go back to Harper again, finished HND there. Again, was a bit fed up with studying and academics and whatnot, so I went and got a job actually in Essex, where you're from.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I got a job on an arable farm there as the sort of sprayer operator, because I'd done a few harvest jobs in between and got a little bit of experience. It was fine, but I did miss the livestock side, and I was a little bit alarmed by all the chemicals I was using, and I was irrigating potatoes and watching the soil sort of disappear.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't know if this is really for me. So I ended up actually going back to Harper, and topping my HND up to a degree, which was agriculture with marketing.
Okay.
So I kind of had a bit of a thought process at the time about what I really want to do further down the line, and I thought, well, I want to farm on my own if possible, and I'd like to be marketing my own stuff, producing as good a quality food as I possibly could.
Yeah.
So went back to Harper, did that. Ended up going to New Zealand after that, which was great.
Cool.
Milking cows, beef,
Man,
sheep.
you really have done everything.
Yeah, I've done quite a lot, I suppose.
You've done the rounds.
Yeah. But I loved it out there. Played a bit of rugby, had a great time, worked really hard, learnt quite a lot about different way of farming, sort of how they were really good at growing grass and rotating stock around. And but I think the biggest thing I took from it was the difference in attitude. It was so the problem wasn't about moaning about problems. It was about thinking about solutions, how you solve problems, how you can actually get things done. It was so positive. It had quite an effect on me, really. And I thought, well, actually, coming from a country that probably struggles with that bit, probably even more so back then. I thought, if I'm going to come back to the UK and farm, I need to do it a bit more like these guys, really.
Okay.
Not just in terms of how they actually physically do it, but actually the attitude.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
You hear that from so many people who go out there. It's as much a mindset shift as anything else.
absolutely. The first week that I was there, you'd sort of get chatting to people, and they'd be writing down the name and address and the number, and they say, "Look, come and stay at ours." I was quite suspicious of it. I thought,
Yeah.
this is a bit odd. Don't get this when you go into middle of Manchester. But you soon found out that they were genuine people and actually really meant it.
Yeah.
So that was one of the biggest things that I took from it, was just how much difference having a positive kind of mindset and positive attitude could have.
Hmm.
So I thought, right, well, I'm going to go home, and actually maybe if I've got the right kind of attitude, I can actually somehow, farm on my own. So got back home. Actually had to sign on the dole at one point because I didn't have a job. I'd run out of money following the British Lions around New Zealand. So, and I went to the job centre at 11 o'clock in the morning. There was people fighting in there. It stank of booze, and I just thought, you know what, this is absolutely ridiculous. I can't be doing this. So, got on my bike when I got home, rode around a load of local farms, and just found myself some work, set myself up self-employed, and thought I need to do something, not rather than signing on the dole. I'm just going to find some work. So I did, and then gradually saved a little bit up, managed to rent a field, and bought some pigs, and started a little business off with my mother, selling pork direct. So I was sort of farming part-time for other people, and then doing these pigs in my spare time. And it kind of built up, and we were doing all sorts of farmers markets, shows, sending stuff to restaurants all over the country. So it grew and grew, and it was going okay. It was a lot of work, and then the recession hit. So in the space of a month, the cost of my feed doubled, and my sales halved. So we kind of realised, well, that this isn't sustainable anymore. So unfortunately, I had to stop doing that, and I found myself at a point where I was pretty pissed off with farming, really, because I put so much effort in.
Yeah.
And I was quite deflated. So I ended up going and doing various different jobs. There's a friend of mine worked for a property company, and they sort of caught wind that I was, probably reasonably handy and out to work. So they gave me a load of sort of handyman work on their properties. And then, to cut a long story short, they sort of said, "Well, what about you doing all the gritting in the winter for our car parks?" And I sort of said, "Well, I don't really know anything about this." So they sent me all their sales figures and said, "Look, if you think you can do this 15% cheaper, we'll lend you the money for the gear, and you can do the job." So I had a couple of meetings with them and stuff, went through it all, and thought, yeah, I'll have a go at this. So I did. It was absolutely freezing cold. I think it was 2011 when I started it.
Okay.
So within sort of 3 months, I earned so much money doing it that I managed to pay them back straight away, and started to get a bit of money in the bank. and then I sort of thought, well, maybe this is my opportunity to get myself a proper farm tenancy
Okay.
and go again. So just kept doing that sort of thing, saving up as much money as I could. Then saw a council farm advertised in Staffordshire.
Right.
I remember having a bit of a chat with my dad, saying, I've seen this advert. What do you think?" And he said, "Well, would you be able to carry on doing the gritting if you did that?" And I could. It wasn't easy, but it was doable. So Dad said, "Yeah, go for it. Let's go and have a look." So we went and had a look at this council farm. I had a bit of money in the bank, so I knew I could probably afford to pay the rent and get started. Went applied for it. I was single at the time, so I talked a couple of girls that I was in college with into pretending to be my partner. If I got an interview, I had one that was a definite and one that was a backup.
That's hilarious.
So anyway, eventually I got an interview, and I bottled it on the partner front and thought, I can't do that because they'll just know. So I went on my own and ended up getting offered the farm. So moved down there. Eventually, actually told the land agent from the council. I said I was going to bring someone to pretend to be my partner. And he laughed and went, "Well, you wouldn't have been the first person that done that. And we would have known."
Yeah.
But it didn't really matter because we were pretty confident you could do it anyway. So
yeah, just stepping back a bit because before we go on to that time, but I'm just because I didn't know any of that part of the story before you've just told me that now, and blimey, you were super resilient through that time because that's a lot of picking yourself up and making yourself adapt to make where you're going happen.
Yeah, like I say, went out to wind the pigs up. I was pretty low for a good 12 months. I've felt pretty let down by farming, I guess.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
surprised.
and I didn't know what I was going to do, really. So I just kept muddling on. It was, and I did actually realize at that point that if I wanted to get back into farming in my own right, I was going to have to earn some money from outside of farming to do it, because going and working on other people's farms just wasn't going to achieve that. It was great getting some experience and to keep myself busy, but it wasn't going to be able to bankroll a tenancy.
Mm.
So I soon realised that, and time passes, you start to get over things a little bit and feel a bit more positive, and then so we got this. I say we. I was on my own. Got this tenancy in Staffordshire. Didn't have any stock. I had a Land Rover and a wheelbarrow and a gritter. So I started by grazing other people's sheep, and then slowly buying some of my own, and then sort of phasing out the other people's and building my own up. I was doing ridiculous amounts of work because I was still driving up to Lancashire, gritting these car parks.
Yeah.
I remember getting as far south as Knutsford I've been up in Bolton or Chorley or somewhere in the middle of the night, and just pulling into the services and thinking, this is ridiculous, because I haven't been to bed for nearly 3 days.
Wow.
And so I rang a guy I knew who was a sheep shearer, and I said, "Look, I can't keep going on like this. Do you fancy doing some of the gritting for me?" So he said, "Yeah, I'll give it a go. It worked well for me because I'm not that busy in the winter." So he took over all the sites up north. I ended up buying another machine and finding a load of work around where the farm was. So that worked out a lot better, and just kept working away and grazing other people's stock. The next sort of summer, I'd have more of my own and built it up and up bit by bit. Ended up taking on some more bits of land round and about on short-term lets. So we were getting a few more acres, and then got a calf rearing contract with Blade Farming. So
Yeah.
converted all the sheds and started rearing calves as well. So things sort of built up, managed to turn it around. So we were doing fairly well. Then kept losing these sort of short-term lets. So one year I'd have 200 acres, the next year I'd have sort of 80.
Blimey.
And I built up to about 600 ewes. I had 250 calves on, I think. They didn't really go outside, so that wasn't too much of a problem. But the sheep were a problem. So I kind of thought, well, I had 600 ewes on 85 acres, which was pretty wet in the winter. And I kind of thought this just isn't sustainable. I can't keep going on not knowing how much land I'm going to have each year.
Yeah.
So decided to start looking for a bigger farm. Looked at various ones, and this one in the Peak District came up. Saw the particulars, and it was a mess.
Okay. Right.
But I thought I've probably actually got a chance of getting this.
Yeah, I mean, not always a bad thing because there's only so many people that are going to want that.
I showed the pictures to my dad. My dad said, "Do not go anywhere near that place. It's a tip." But I said, yes, Dad. But we can tidy that up. And the thing is, I've got a realistic chance of getting it.
Yeah.
So applied for that. We'd actually arranged to get married on the farm in Staffordshire, and it was all booked. Everything was sorted, and then we ended up getting this farm in South Yorkshire. So we kept the same wedding date, but then actually got married on the farm just after we moved.
Oh, nice. Okay.
That was, it was quite stressful actually.
Quite a lot going on.
Yeah. But yeah, no, we got there, got married, and started to square the farm up. We were there nearly 5 years. Ended up taking another farm on, which was about 45 minutes drive away from the same landlord. Again, bit of a tip. But managed to sort of turn it around. And to cut a long story short, really again ended up in the same position where we needed a bigger farm. Didn't want to be traveling between two places, so I was a bit worried about how I was going to sustain the rent. We ended up had B&B pigs, cattle, and sheep. So there was quite a lot going on, but it was spread over 2 farms. They weren't in the best of states, paying a reasonably high rent. My BPS was covering the rent. I had a lot of problems getting paid on time by the RPA, which really did put us under a lot of stress at times.
There's no surprise.
No.
But they have been better recently, but yeah.
Well, they still owe me a fortune. But anyway.
Oh God.
So I sort of thought, well, what are we going to do going forward? Because I can't see the rent reducing. I'm spending a lot of money, of my own money, doing up someone else's farm, and how are we going to pay tens of thousands of pounds of rent when there's no BPS? So saw an advert for the place here, which was advertised on a contract farming basis.
Okay.
So thought, well, this sounds quite interesting. Well, let's have a look at this. So we went to have a look. All pretty positive, really. So thought there's no harm in applying. So we did put quite a lot of effort into applying, and eventually ended up upping sticks again and moving to Cumbria to a big place on a totally different arrangement. I mean, it's sort of one step back to take 2 steps forward, because farming wise, we had got it performing reasonably well over in the Peak District. But the BPS issue did worry me.
Yeah. I can
see
that.
Did quite fancy getting back to the northwest as well, because that's kind of where I'm from, really.
Exactly.
And I just, thought, well, let's go for it and see what we can do here. So
yeah,
here we are.
Exactly. And the business, in terms of your focus now, you're looking at premium. You're also looking at zero carbon beef, I read.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of heading in that direction on the other farm anyway. I mean, a lot of the reason why I've farmed like I have is because to start with, I couldn't really afford to do it any other way. I'd learned a bit about rotational grazing and whatnot in New Zealand. And I knew if I was going to do it myself, I would want to be doing that. When I rocked up in Stafford with a Land Rover and a wheelbarrow, I couldn't afford a wagon load of fertilizer or any stuff like that. It just wasn't an option.
Yeah.
Ironically, when I did do all right, I tried to farm like that and soon realised that I was no better off. So ended up going back to a kind of lower input system. But then when we moved up to the Peak District, I went into a couple of environmental schemes and started to realise, well, actually, the decisions and way that you're farming is having a huge impact on the environment and nature around you. I mean, at one point we had 140 curlews in a 5-acre paddock.
Wow.
Which was pretty awesome, really. So I thought, well, this is great. So why don't we sort of focus a little bit more on this? So we were very much heading in that direction in the peaks. We were changing things so that when we put winter cropping in, we weren't washing soil away. Quite mindful of nesting season for the wading birds. And then it became quite apparent that this was all actually making our end product better as well.
Yeah.
So the opportunity to come up here in the Westmorland Dales was a great opportunity to build on that. It's quite a big farm. It's a great area environmentally. It's in a national park, so and they've done quite a bit of work here already in terms of tree planting and schemes and that sort of thing. So there's a great opportunity to build on that. And being a totally different kind of setup to how I was. So from being a tenant farmer to a contract farmer is there's still a lot of pressure financially, but it's different.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like we've managed to achieve here probably in 18 months what it took me 5 years to do as a tenant.
Wow. Okay.
Because there's so much pressure being a tenant just to pay the rent, and there wasn't often that much left over to reinvest in things. Whereas the situation is different here, so we're managing to probably push. We're behind where we were on the last farm, but we're managing to push forward quicker. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So in terms of markets, who you're selling to, just tell me about that side.
Struck up quite a good relationship with the Westmorland farm shop on the M6.
Yes, I thought as much.
Yeah. So we did a little experiment on the last farm with some hens, which worked quite well. So I wanted to do it on a bigger scale here. I kind of had a couple of meetings with them and said, look, this is what I want to do. Would you be interested in selling our eggs? And once they got their head around what I was trying to do, they were really keen straight away. So
brilliant.
So we managed to set that up knowing that we had a market for the eggs, which is great because it's literally 15 minutes away.
Perfect.
Food miles are minimal. It's working really well. Then I kind of realised I'd previously been selling lambs to Tesco. I was doing beef on contract for Dovecote Park, and then B&B pigs as well, which was great at the time. But I kind of thought all this work that we're doing is kind of being a bit lost when it's on a pack on a supermarket shelf.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to add a bit more value and see it through to the end a bit better. So got in touch with a company called Lake District Farmers, who we're now starting to market more of our beef to. They bring chefs on farm so they can see for themselves what's happening and sort of convey my passion, if you like, through to the customers at the end, which I'm not really getting when it's in a packet on a shelf, like I just said. So that's good. We're also sort of managing to command a bit more of a premium because we're farming in a more sensitive way, which is reflected in the quality of the product, and also we've got a very low carbon footprint. I know there's all sorts of different ways and cherry picking, whatever, when it comes to that, but we've done various different audits and tried to come up with an average. So we're pretty confident that our footprint is genuine. But rather than looking at selling carbon credits, we're kind of using it to add value to our product, which I think is a bit more realistic.
Yep.
which seems to be creating quite a lot of interest with a lot of the big corporates down in London. So at the moment, the beef is on the menu in the big HSBC building in Canary Wharf.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd like to see it in some restaurants and that sort of thing, but I think it will follow. We're sort of in a position now where we're kind of almost having to add value to be sustainable and profitable going forward. The only thing I would like to happen is we are sort of monitoring the quality of the meat and eggs that we're producing as we go on. So looking at sort of nutrient density rather than kilos per hectare or whatever, quite as much. So it does bother me a little bit that what we're producing now probably actually isn't affordable for a lot of people. But I kind of hope in the future that because it'll be so much better quality, it will become affordable. So people will be paying more, but they won't need as much, if you see what I mean.
Mm.
So I'm hoping that'll follow. And also I think the environmental benefits are for everybody as well. So
Yeah. I mean, that sort of idea of nutrient density having value in itself, the conversations that you have with, I suppose, people further down the line, do you see a sort of that being actually quantifiable? If not now, then sort of as it would get into a stage where we might actually say, well, we're looking actually the nutrient density of this product, and this is going to have, and the value is going to go up as a result.
Yeah, I can see that happening. Yeah, I mean, I've been and seen a few farmers. A couple of guys from America met not long ago, and they have got scientific proof that the change in their farming system had increased the nutritional value of their beef by 85% and the value of the eggs by 50%.
Wow.
Which is pretty significant. And there's also huge knock-on benefits, environmentally, ecologically. So for me, that is very much the direction that we're going in. It's where I see the future of these sort of farms. I don't really want to be a commodity producer anymore. I've done that, burnt myself out doing it, caused a lot of stress. And like I said earlier, we ended up going back to how we were farming when we first started because it just didn't work for me. So I can't see me trying to push numbers and numbers out of this farm as being the future. I just don't think it's sustainable. I don't think it's going to work environmentally or economically.
Let's broaden this out into some wider industry questions. And you did used to be on the NFU's Upland Forum, so let's talk a bit about the uplands. And you've seen a lot of the uplands over time as well, so you've got quite a good unique perspective on this. In terms of future challenges and the situation at the moment, and I suppose that big word uncertainty, where do you see the main challenge for upland farmers at the moment?
I think funding is a big challenge. We were pinning our hopes on elms. There's a huge amount of uncertainty regarding that now.
Yeah.
SFI isn't going to make a huge difference to people, and there's just so many unknowns regarding policy and legislation and whatnot. It's very difficult for people to plan how the things are going to work going forward. But I think you probably need to go back to that Kiwi attitude a little bit and perhaps turn some negatives into positives and try and look at things a bit differently. We got the uplands, in my opinion, has the biggest potential to deliver environmentally and, in terms of helping meet targets, carbon targets and COP27, everything else. I think the uplands is the place that can deliver that. It does frustrate me a little bit because I feel like a lot of policy is designed around bailing people out that have caused a lot of problems.
Okay.
Whereas if a lot of upland farms are probably in a fairly good position already in terms of carbon and the environment, are you going to get paid to maintain that, or are the payments really geared around people that can make net gains, which is probably a lot easier on the poorest soils in the southeast. I don't think that that's necessarily fair. I and probably needs looking at. But when we get chefs coming here and they bring the front of house and the kitchen staff and all sorts, and they're absolutely blown away by what we can achieve up in the uplands.
Yeah.
They have no idea, and they every time they come, they say, we had no idea that you guys were doing all this stuff. So we need to kind of shout a bit more about that and work on that actual quality of what we're producing rather than quantity. And I think there's a great future for a lot of upland farms.
Yeah, and I suppose linked to that as well, I mean, the number of conversations I've had with farmers recently about supply chain issues or frustrations in terms of the more commodity side of the market. What would you say to farmers who are perhaps in that in that line of things in the moment, in that situation, as someone who's been there, done that, and thought and come out the other side and actually think, okay, how can I add value? What else can I do that's different? In terms of just approach and resilience and all that side, what would you say to them?
I just think you need to think outside the box a little bit. We need to also look at things from the consumer's point of view. What do they want? Yes, they want cheap food to a certain extent, but there's very few people that I've met that don't like what we're doing in terms of the environmental gains that we're making. I think that there's an opportunity there to engage with retailers and processors and build on the sort of things that we're doing. I do think that they're becoming a little bit more aware of that, and hopefully that should command some sort of premium. I mean, personally, I think that they're missing a trick, really. Why aren't they advertising the good things that we're doing in the uplands in the supermarkets? Consumers would like to see that, and perhaps by buying some of our stuff, they can feel that they're doing their bit to an extent. So I'd like to see that happen. But there's plenty of opportunity out there to add value and work with other companies. The reality for me has been that it's a reasonably big farm. I don't have time to go and direct market anymore. I could do that when I have 50 pigs and my mother helping me back at home, but
exactly.
I can't do that bit. So there has to be a bit of compromise somewhere, and you do have to work with third parties, but they are out there, and there's something in it for everyone if you get it right.
Yeah. And just one more wider industry question, looking at the sheep sector in particular. Obviously, recently the American market opened up. Is that an actual opportunity for sheep farmers in your point of view and in the long run?
Potentially, yes, but personally, I'd rather see the food that I produce remain in the UK. I think we should be focusing more on providing food for our own communities, our own sort of regions and country, rather than importing as much as we do, and then having to export. The system's pretty crazy, really. And if we're serious about meeting environmental targets again, then why the hell are we sending meat across to America, and why the hell are we buying lamb from New Zealand? It doesn't make any sense. We can do it here in the UK.
What's next for you? You've got a lot going on, and you've built your current system. I heard I can't remember whether I read somewhere. Are you doing something with your pig operation? You may be expanding that.
Potentially, we haven't done. We've got a big shed here that's empty most of the year, so we are looking to do something in that. We just did a sort of nutrient budget to see where we sit in terms of the extra muck on the farm. The idea of doing the pigs on the last farm was to bring fertility to the farm.
Yep.
I'm not convinced that we need to do that here to that extent, because we've sort of using other ways to tap into the nutrients that are already here on the farm. So looking at some sort of cover cropping, and we've been doing some compost spraying and all sorts of different things. So we're going for a more sort of sandals on approach than having to bring in so much fertility from another enterprise. So not sure what we're going to do on that front yet.
Okay.
Part of quite an exciting project with Lancaster University. So really looking at how we're going to market what we're doing properly. Also, getting we've got someone doing a PhD on this farm and a couple of others. So really getting some hard evidence to try and prove that what we're doing actually works.
Interesting.
Because we all know that what we're doing is good, or we certainly think that way. But we need to be able to prove it if we're serious about rolling this out. So it's quite exciting being part of that. We're in the early stages at the moment, but we will be analysing nutrient density, looking at ecological gains, soils, carbon. We've started it already, but monitoring it and hopefully being able to actually prove scientifically that how we're changing this farming model is having an impact, positive impact, which will be great for us as a marketing tool, but also great for the industry as a whole, because we can say if we get questions from government, we can say, well, look at this, here's the evidence, it does work, so support us, and then we can start doing some real good.
Fascinating. We're going to start to round things up, and we always finish the show with the same two questions, which I'm going to ask you now. The first is, if you have a message for the public, any message, what would it be, Jim?
It's a difficult one, because a lot of farmers always say, "Oh, the public are totally out of touch with the countryside and farming." Well, actually, isn't it a bit of both? Aren't farmers out of touch with the public as well? So, we're not bad people. Come and ask us questions. We want you to know about what we're doing. So I would like a lot more engagement with the public, really, because there's very few people that come here that aren't fascinated by what we do, and I'd really like to see more of that.
Yeah, well, I think with Caroline Lucas's access bill coming up again, I think we all farmers might be getting in touch with the public more and more at the moment. So,
well,
that might be one.
In the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's a bad thing. I want to do a campsite here. That's another thing we're trying to set up. Yep. Obviously there's an income from it, which is important, but I do want people to come and see what we're doing as well. So they'll go and spread the word, and the message that the positive message coming from UK farmers will spread to the public, and that's what we need to work on.
Brilliant. And finally, a message for farmers.
Probably the flip of what I just said, I suppose. So
yeah.
Don't necessarily think it's the public that are out of touch with us. Maybe it's us that are out of touch with the public, and at the end of the day, they're the people that eat our produce. It's their money that funds our subsidies and schemes and whatever else. So we need to be mindful of that, and try and engage with them more, and just have a positive outlook together, rather than having two different sides to it. I do really, my personal feeling is that poor quality diets are having a huge detrimental effect on society as a whole, in countries across the world, not just in the UK. And I think that if we can improve what people are eating and improve the environment, it will benefit the country in many, many different ways. The economy, people's health, people's well-being, the way they feel day to day. And I think that's a position that we really need to work hard to get ourselves into.
I think that's a good thought to hold for this week. We'll leave it there. Thank you, Jim, for coming on. I'm so glad we finally managed to do this.
Well, I enjoyed it,
and it's been fantastic hearing all about your story, and I just want to say well done, actually, for getting sort of through that massive path to end up where you are now, because what a journey. So I think that'll inspire a lot of people. So thank you.
I think life's never easy, but there's always been a part of me that's known what I wanted to do. So that has helped me keep going forward.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is probably just, don't give up.
Yeah. Yeah. You might get tripped up now and then, but just keep going, get back on the horse and carry on.
Definitely. And if you got the right mindset and the right attitude, things will generally go your way. It's not easy, but you will go in the right direction.
Yeah. I think that's an even better thought to leave it on. Let's leave it on that thought. Thank you very much for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the show wherever you're listening. Tell everyone you know about it. And please also support us on Patreon. You can join the Meet the Farmers Supporters Club by visiting patreon.com/Meet the Farmers. I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers. Thank you very much for listening. And I hope you all have a great week.
It only works if it's a special, I think, is how it would work. You can't really do it on a regular basis, unless you've got, and sadly, chefing world, we're digressing now, but chefing world,
that's fine.
you're losing skill set now. Sadly, you don't have the same skill set that you'd have 10 years ago, because there's not the chefs coming through like in agriculture, so it's becoming more and more simpler. And you're getting that bigger gap of like fine dining where they'll take the chefs, but the bottom line, like your average ones, because food is so expensive, you don't want to pay the labor, so it's quicker to buy it in and chuck it in a fryer and just turn it out en masse than it is to have somebody there to be able to butcher up a lamb and know the skill. So it's changing. That's an industry that's changing as the same as agriculture is.